Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I am joined once again by Konstantinos as we take a gentle meander through the world of IA. And this week we're going to the cold north for your spotlight.
Indeed.
Now, the spotlight itself is called Aettir And Tings, and we'll get to that in a moment because I suppose there's sort of three main components of this little spotlight. But I want to just very briefly look at it's almost a throwaway line at the start where it's discussing how people in the south view the Nords, and the Nords are essentially the Nords. They're one people, and very much in the same way we would go Vikings.
Exactly, pretty much. Pretty much.
There's no real breakdown of the people there, even though they would see themselves as Nordic or Scandinavian or Frero-Scandi, or there's lots of different sort of divisions and splits. But then there was one little sort of tagline, like a little almost throwaway line, that they're not the only inhabitants of Mannheim themselves, that there are Sapmelis, a sort of a native or indigenous tribe there as well.
That is true. It is implied that those are the original inhabitants, in a way, of the island, which I think kind of deliberately we didn't explore more now because it would deviate into a completely different spotlight, I think. But it is also implied that, okay, then possibly the Nords were actually a migrating people from the southern continent at one time or another, which is possibly historically accurate in the world of AI. Let's put it like that.
Yeah. Makes sense.
But yes, there are other tribes there, native tribes to Mannheim, which again, and I think this goes to show that it's very easy to fall into that trap, that even the Nords that kind of coexist with them collectively call them the Sapmelas, but they're actually, and divide them in four different large tribes, which is not strictly true, and some of them would take offense by being called that. Others would love it. Others is how they define their own people. I actually had to do quite a bit of research because I wanted to be very careful with the real life analogs. Yes, here. And the Sapmelas is actually one of the names that the Sami people use. It literally means kin of Sami, if I understand correctly. I'm not sure. And they are not the same as Inuits, apparently. They are completely different cultural groups. And I didn't want to mix because we, not being familiar with those, it's very easy for us to collectively think of them as, they are similar people, yes, or different tribes. But I wanted to give that, it's very easy to fall into that trope. But that does not reflect the truth. The same as with the 100 Kingdoms, think about the Nords. It's the Nords, but it's not really.
And I think that even the statements made in the spotlight that it would be the same as the Nords looking at the 100 Kingdoms and going, well, they're all
pretty much. They're all the fire children.
They're all the same. They're all exactly the same. There's no difference between them. So speaking then of differences between them, the first part is the Aettir itself, which is sort of clan divisions.
They are the original divisions that they had. I think that if we try to look at it historically, it goes back way to their first establishment on Mannheim, the first migration there. And those are more closely related blood. Not exactly blood. It's not exactly. It's the same way that a clan, yes, it's loosely affiliated through blood, but there's also ties of, we live in the same village, we follow the same leaders or elders, so we're kind of the same clan in a way. Eventually, we become that through marriage, and so that is a first distinction. They are the Aettir, and singular is Ait, which is or Et. It's kind of, I can't be sure if I'm honest.
I'm staying well clear of this. I get enough trouble for my Scandinavian pronunciation.
I hope I'm forgiven from all the actual Nordic people that do know how to pronounce this, but at least we try to stay close to the actual spelling of the words. But those are the first divisions, and for a long time, especially during the time, when the gods of Yggdrasil were still around, there was The general conception is, or the image that we have about them is that they were more unified, but they were not really. Like, when has any large group of humans gone along well with each other?
Yeah, it's trying to get any number of people to pull in the same direction is you're always onto hiding to nothing.
And knowing that the gods of Yggdrasil are analogs of Nordic real life gods, they also had their differences. So the people that were devoted to them would reflect those kind of differences and clashes. So those things, those divisions were very deeply, and still are, by and large, maybe not as much as they used to be, but they still are very deeply felt. It's part of one's identity to belong to one of the Aettir and the 8 that they belong to. So, and they had alliances, they had blood feuds, which was a huge thing and still is in in the Nords of Mannheim. Eventually, this led to the second division because there needed to be some kind of referee between those blood feuds, someone that would bring peace. And the coming of the Einherjar really helped with that before their decline into or devolution, let's say, of most of them. They were an authority they could turn to. They didn't like this role, by and large. This is the generic, of course. Some did. Some still do. But most of them did not like to be seen as leaders. They preferred to be seen as examples, in a way. And so they agreed to mediate between those blood feuds, but not exclusively. They formed councils in a way around them with representatives from different clans to discuss offenses and give penalties when they're needed, or offer compensation, appropriate compensation, depending on the offense. And if one looks into Viking and Nordic history, one will see very interesting ideas about what that kind of compensation would mean. From you murdered my son, that means 30 workers, and I get half of, and like 10,000 gold or something. They had very specific ideas about how much a life was worth, depending on how close to the leader of the clan that life was. Which is very interesting and very bloody if you think about it.
And it's also, I think it's where we get the likes of the outlaws from then as well. People who cast out from their society. Is there a sort of a similar idea with the Nords then? People who have offended so greatly that they're forced away from the Aettin society that they're used to, and there are
yes, of course.
clans.
Of course, and the clan itself might, because these, remember that the concept of the Ting was to regulate differences between different Aettir, but it was more or less self-governed. So yes, you would be cast out or be considered that you're not part of this 8 anymore. You do not enjoy either its benefits or its protection, anything, and you're not bound by its blood feuds also.
Just handy. I mean, well, it's one way of getting out of it, I suppose.
Yeah, true, but
probably not the best way.
Not really, because remember that Mannheim is a very, very harsh country. Sticking together is the main reason that mankind has managed to even survive the odds there. So exile very often, and especially in the older times before the larger settlements or towns were kind of founded and established, exile pretty much meant death, and a horrific cold death, or dismemberment and eaten alive death.
Well, it's not without its benefits, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things. I also quite like the fact that the Tings themselves, they're not geographic restricted areas of sort of law. So it is possible for somebody from a specific family or clan or act, or however you want to sort of break it down, can present their case to a number of things that they may be bordering on, and depending on who is actually either currently presiding or who has presided in the past, they may view different crimes in a very different way. So not knowing who you're going to go in front of could be detrimental to your case and be viewed
or beneficial.
Yeah, yes, you really.
I think maybe my legal background shows here in the sense of exploiting jurisdiction. You go to the favorable court.
I mean, it makes perfect sense though, especially when...
It does, and actually, that realization played a huge part in the change that the Tings went through. That they started from being essentially a courthouse.
Yeah.
Slowly, they became lawmaking. In a vague sense, not very strict sense, lawmaking councils. So, or tradition-defining councils, let's put it this way. It's possibly more accurate. Because all of a sudden, they realize that there's politics here that can be played. Because if I go to this, or I know that in that thing, the other 8th member will be there presiding, or will be a voice there that he's well respected, so maybe I will be listened to, or the lady whatever is there and she's an ally to my house, so to my 8th, so she will be helping, or I should avoid the other one because of this. And that kind of gave political life to Mannheim that didn't exist before. This is a very recent thing also, and it is actually something that we explore right now in the living world through the story of Timoleon, because he's exactly torn between should the Nords return back to how they used to be, or should they evolve into this more southern influence.
I was going to say democracy, but it wouldn't be. But yeah, because it's interesting. I mean, I've looked a little bit at the Viking Tings, and I don't know how closely the Nord one would mirror, but depending on the case being presented, they would have multiples of 12. So you would have your basic jury or court of 12, but if it was really serious, it would be maybe 36 people would be deciding your fate. And in that way, if you have these groups of people that presumably are drawn from a caste higher than the average, then you start to form a caste system within society that have a great amount of power, and then I think the high table then obviously reflects that further, where you get layers upon layers sort of growing up, and a nobility essentially.
The Nords are not quite there yet.
Yeah,
that's actually what's at stake here. Are we going down that road? Are we going the road of a more civilized, in bracket, society where there is an established order and classes or castes and levels of citizenship?
Sure.
Or do we remain the same warrior-based society that we are, that has a semblance of structure so that it keeps working together, and to face threats like, the 100 Kingdoms, or existence itself as it is on Mannheim. So that is exactly what the Nords are going through. It's a very defining moment in their history, and we are actually going to allow the community to influence heavily that through the living world.
Fascinating stuff. Well, there you have it, folks. It's a very brief sort of generalizations about what you're going to find in this week's Spotlight. It's definitely worth going over and taking a look at the full thing. Or should I say ting? If you have any questions, pop them below. I'm going to go before Konstantinos hits me.
No, I enjoy it, pun. Bye-bye, guys.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.